Hi everyone, Miss Lori here for our last and final fame lesson for this year. Can you believe how fast the year has gone? Oh my goodness. So I'm super excited for this month's artist and composer. We have Jackson Pollock and Scott Joplin, one of my favorites. You'll see about them in just a second.
Today's artist is Paul Jackson Pollock. Jackson, as they called him instead of Paul, was born in Coyote, Wyoming in 1912, just a little bit after the automobile. And can you imagine how cold it was in Jackson, Wyoming in January?
Brr.
He was the youngest of 5 boys. I do not know how his mom had time to quilt, weave, and crochet with 5 boys and running a farm. And they moved a lot because his father had various jobs and they moved around. And can you imagine all the stuff she had to do? Anyway, Jackson was kind of a shy kid, and when he was about 8 years old, his parents split up, and his older brother became more like a father figure to him. And he grew up to be like 6 feet tall when he was about 15. And he was kind of shy, and he didn't really do well in school. He got in trouble a couple of times and was kicked out.
Ooh.
But when he was 17, he decided he wanted to be an artist. Jackson's brother had moved to New York earlier and was taking art lessons with Thomas Hart Benton. And Jackson decided he would move to New York and live with Charles and also take lessons with Thomas. And he was a regionalist painter, which means he did things kind of like our Grant Wood of the Midwest. And that's the kind of painting that Jackson was learning about. Also during this time, the country was going through its own madness with the Depression, and a lot of people were out of work. And during this time, he had moved to New York. Roosevelt had started the Work Public Administration, and a branch of it was they would take artists and they did murals all over the country. It helped with the unemployment of the time of the artists, and they also did other projects for unskilled laborers. They built roads and schools and tried to get America back to work because of the Depression. Anyway, he and his other brother, Sandy, worked on this project, and they went across the country painting murals. Also during this time, after he did that, he met his future wife, Lee Krause, and Peggy Guggenheim, who was an art patron, started being interested in his art. And right before all this, or during all this time, he had gone to a Pablo Picasso collection at the MoMA in New York, and he went, oh, he's really interesting, and maybe I can push the boundaries of my own work with this. And I have some artwork to show you about the different things he was into at the time. After he and Lee were married, Peggy Guggenheim loaned him some money to buy a farm in New York and Long Island, and there he took the studio. He made a studio out of an old barn. Time magazine did a 4-page spread of him and asked if he was the greatest artist in the United States. And of course, this brought him a lot of popularity because he was just starting his drip method and with artistic expressionism. Also, this is when his critics became, okay, well, maybe this is a bunch of hooky stuff, you know? And so he was getting good news and bad news about all this, and he couldn't perform. They came out and tried to, on TV, watch him, film him doing his work. I can't do that. That's just too much pressure, because he liked to do his own painting and all by himself, and we'll talk about how he did his work when I show you his work, because it'll make a lot more sense. This is an example of the murals that were painted during the WPA's work. You can see there's a great big mural on a wall, sometimes in the subway, sometimes on buildings, just all over the United States. And this is one that Jackson Pollock helped with. Okay, this is one of Jackson Pollock's early paintings. It's called The Flame, and you can see the representation of the red, like it's like in a flame. And here's another one of his early paintings. And here we have Blue, or Blue Moby Dick. And Jackson went through what they called his drip period. And this is where he actually started the abstract expression. Abstract meaning not realistic, and expressionism was to show how you feel. Because around the 1900s, when they painted real pictures. They didn't paint anything that you couldn't see or anything that you could express. It was always of the nature, still life, lifeless objects, paintings of buildings, things like that. When Jackson started this new process, it was new and in vogue. It was everybody was just going, whoa. And actually, he never even went to Paris. So he started this in the United States and nothing about Paris. So the United States was becoming his own big art center. Okay, he gave up his easel. He would put his canvas on the ground, and he would take just regular paint, for house paint and or enamel, and he would take a stick or a scalpel and just drip the paint. Sometimes he walked around and he'd take one color and he would let it dry, and then he would think about it. And you can see right here, he's just dripping the paint on the canvas. Sometimes he hung them on the wall to work, and sometimes they were on the floor. And you can see the movement of his stick. In 1999, Jackson had his own stamp. This mural was painted in Peggy Guggenheim's house. This is one of his first pieces of during his drip method, and he believed that it was the viewer, not the artist, who defines and interprets the meaning of the abstract expressionistic artwork. And also it's called action painting, because you can see kind of all the movement in here. This one was made in 1946, and it's called Eyes in the Heart. You can kind of see little eyes in here if you look closely, but you have to use your imagination and kind of hearts. But remember, he would just do the colors and then stop and do more colors, just dripping them on this paint. And this one's called Reflections of the Big Dipper in 1947. Kind of looks like it could be done out in space, doesn't it? And this one is called Out of the Web. And this one is called Lavender Mist. And this one is Blue Poles. You can kind of see the blue poles. And this was actually bought by the Australian government. And so it's in Australia out there in the National Museum. And this one's called The Deep. And if you look really close, it looks like it's feathers.
Yeah, it does.
Doesn't it? And then you could probably turn, this will turn with you. But you have to look, see? Oh, that looks really cool.
If we turned it sideways this way.
There you go. I forgot to tell you that also during this time when he was doing his drip painting, when he traded his brushes for the sticks and trowels and knives, he would add different things sometimes to his paintings, like like coins, sand, broken glass, buttons, nails. That kind of made some of his paintings 3D looking.
Give it texture.
Yeah, lots of texture. Okay. And here are some of his more colorful ones where you can just look at it and maybe see the joy he was having because of the bright colors. Oh, and here's another one. Doesn't it look like flowers in here? You have to use your imagination. So you can see where he said that it was left to the viewer to see what they saw in the paintings. Okay, I think this one's Christmas lights. What do you guys think? And see, he just left the background white from the canvas and just did his things with, this looks bright and cheery with bright colors. And we're gonna end on my favorite. I think it looks like flowers, maybe in like lilies in a pond or something. Okay, so here's our art piece for today. It's called Composition by Jackson Pollock. And so we can just see the colors you can see in your mind what you think this represents, but also, which is so interesting about his work, is you can turn it another way. And
then it looks totally different.
Yeah, and you get a different perspective.
Yep.
Same thing if you turn it this way. You can't do that with a lot of realistic paintings, can you? So you can hang it on your wall, and if you got tired of it this way, you could turn it this way and have a new view, a whole new perspective on your wall about this painting.
So this is Scott Joplin. He was born November 24th, 1868 in Texarkana, Texas. So 1868, about right there. So Scott Joplin was one of 6 kids, and his parents were very musical. His dad played the violin, and his mother played the banjo. And they kind of taught him the musical foundation that he had until about 7 years old. He started teaching himself piano while his mother would clean houses and make a little extra money. He would practice the piano after school, and he really loved that. There was a guy that came later. He was German, and he was a teacher of Scott's, and his name was Julius Weiss, and he was a German guy who came over in the late 1860s, and he helped Scott Joplin really hone his craft and get really good at the piano. And then later, wasn't too long, that Scott joined a quartet where they were singing, the 4 guys from his hometown, and sometimes Scott would play the music to go along with. So Scott Joplin left home in the 1880s to become a traveling musician, and he got lots of jobs at churches and saloons and fairs. And in fact, the Chicago World Fair is a place, well, in Chicago, obviously, but the World's Fair used to happen every year, and all these inventors and music and artists, and they would all gather, and they would put on like kind of a fair and a show, like kind of like our state fair now. Anyway, back then in 1897, they invited Scott Joplin to perform there, and 27 million people attended that year. So his music obviously took right off and became very popular, and he was known as the king of ragtime. And you're asking me, what the heck is ragtime? Ragtime is a kind of music with ragged rhythms, and that sounds weird, but ragged meaning syncopation. So when I'm counting to the beat of a music, I count 1, 2, 3, 4. Syncopation means you count on the offbeat. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. You kind of hear like the jazzy sound, right? So he developed his song, Maple Leaf Rag, which is our song for today. I'm so excited. You'll find out why in a minute. But he wrote it 4 years later, and it was a huge hit. It was actually the first piece of sheet music to hit and sell 1 million copies. So, and that was like in the early 1900s. That was pretty amazing. And from there, he moved to St. Louis. It was the hotbed of ragtime music. And there he also wrote The Entertainer, which I learned to play, one of my favorite songs, on the piano when I was growing up. In 1907, Scott Joplin moved to New York, and there he wrote and produced his very first opera, which ragtime and opera, I don't know if it really goes together, but it was called Tremonisha, which was all about a girl who lived in a community where a lot of kids like her did not go to school because of the color of their skin, which is very sad. And anyway, she learns to read, and she teaches other people to learn how to read, and it really gives hope and community. But unfortunately, the opera closed after the first show. It was not successful. I don't know why, but people just didn't really like it. But later, in 1917, unfortunately, Scott Joplin died of dementia. And but later, in 1972, people came back to his opera and produced it then, and it was a huge success, and he won an award for it, even though he had already passed. But so he is known for the king of ragtime. Let's talk all about Maple Leaf Rag. So Scott was one of the early African American musicians that actually wrote down their sheet music so others could play it. And Joplin felt so strongly about how his music should be played. He didn't only write down the notes, but he made actual notes in the sidebar of how strongly to play certain things or how much feeling to have. And it's really funny because when Scott Joplin spoke, he was very shy and he kind of had a whisper, even though his music was like big and jazzy. So, but he was an outstanding performer. He was hired to play the piano at his friend's music club, which happened to be called Maple Leaf Club, hence Maple Leaf Rag, right? And the first time he wrote the song, it was denied. Like, they said, no, this is junk, we're not going to publish it. And then he tried again, and later they gave him $50 and a royalty fee on each piece of sheet music that he sold. And of course, he sold 50,000 copies, which made him a lot of money. And back to talking about ragtime. Remember, ragtime means ragged rhythms. And it's kind of a clunky and a tingy sound on the piano. And the reason why is the piano inside has these little mallets, and they're wrapped in felt. And when you hit the keys, it goes ding, 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 and it hits the wire, and that's what makes the sound, right? Well, ragtime, they wanted that clunky, tingy sound. So a lot of composers like Scott would go inside the piano and remove that felt part of the hammer, so that when the wooden hammer hit the wire, it made a very cool, different kind of noise. And yeah, I thought that was pretty fun. Anyway, my most exciting part of this lesson is my beautiful cousin who lives in Wyoming. Shout out to Amber Brysocker. We love her so much. I love her so much. Anyway, she and I learned to play the piano about the same time when we were like 4th grade. And she is phenomenal. And she can play Maple Leaf Rag, and she's going to for you right now. So enjoy. She is amazing, and thank you, Amber, for doing this. Much better than like a YouTube somebody we don't know.
art project is inspired by Jackson Pollock. Unfortunately, we can't be in a big barn with paper on the floor. What we're going to do is put drops of paint on a plate here. But first, don't forget to put your name on the back.
Yes.
And if you want, you can put Pollocks for the artist. That's who we're doing. Anyway, what we're going to do is the teacher's going to put 3 globs of paint on your plate. I'm already making a mess.
Oh, do you want me to open it? Your finger.
Oh yeah, I'll have paint on my fingers now. And then we are going to take our marble, which rolled off. I can't find
It's right
it
here.
now. Oh, here we go. Here's our marble. And we're just going to put it in the middle of the plate, and we're just going to roll the marble.
And you're going to do this outside.
Outside.
So you don't get the floor all yucky. Ooh, that's pretty.
Woo! And see, you can see. Oh, you might have to do this overhead. See, it's kind of slow.
Yeah.
You can
Just be careful the marble doesn't roll off.
the plate. Yeah.
Woo!
You can try to make something out of it, but turn it.
That's pretty.
The marble looks like one of those with all the colors on it. I mean,
Uh-huh.
what are they called? I don't remember.
The tiger's eye.
Tiger's eye. There you go. The marble's just as pretty.
Yeah. And you get to keep the marble afterwards.
Yay!
You got to clean it. And then,
Yeah. Let it dry before you take it out.
yeah.
And then if you want, you can just go around the outside. This is your project. No 2 projects will be alike. So you can see I can just leave some of the thick stuff in there. You can see where it's actually has the other colors mixed in with it. So if you want, you can leave it like that, or you can roll it around even more. Remember, as you roll and you mix the colors, they may make new colors.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. Okay, we're having too much fun here.
All right. Kitana likes it.
What do you think, Kitty? Good job. Good job, Nona.
Yay.